Welcome to another exciting episode of...
Dravo Vane? I gotta help you out here, Chief? Jesus Christ. You've been hanging around Richie too much.
Okay, I guess we're going to leave that in. So today's story is another one that was overheard. Actually, it was started out being overheard, but Sebastian got intrigued and wanted to learn more. And this was at a hunting store, right?
Cabela's.
Yeah, so just to set it up here a little bit, Sebastian's hearing this woman, an older lady, talking about this story of a Bigfoot encounter that involved her husband. So Sebastian, the others weren't really believing it, but Sebastian was quite intrigued, so he approached her to find out more about it. And so, Sebastian, tell our viewers what she told you.
Let me set the picture. I'm in Cabela's, looking at the hunting section. This fragile old, short lady in the camping section looking for stuff. The salesperson or whoever works there goes up to this old lady, and she's probably in her 80s, maybe 90s. And it's like, ma'am, can I help you and all this and that? And she's like, oh, yeah. And I don't know what they were talking about. I just overheard, and the story went as she was going to go dump her late husband's ashes at his favorite fishing place in Canada. And her grandkids, her kids were going to go drive up there during the summer and dump his ashes. And she was asking, what caught my eye or my ear was, I know you all sell bear repellent. Do you all sell Bigfoot repellent? And the guy's looking at her like, pardon me, ma'am? She's like, yeah, do you all sell Bigfoot repellent? My husband had his Bigfoot encounter at his favorite fishing spot, and I need Bigfoot repellent to fight away the Bigfoot that he encountered. Everybody around there is just like looking at this old lady like she's really lost it. Alzheimer's, dementia, whatever. She's like, no, I'm serious. Do you all sell Bigfoot repellent? And the guy was like, well, we sell a 44 Magnum or a 357 Magnum. And she's like, well, will that stop it? I mean, she obviously didn't know. I'm not saying she didn't know what she was talking about, but she wasn't making sense. And I kind of leaned over. I said, man, I don't mean to pry and eavesdrop, but did you say your husband had a Bigfoot encounter? She's like, oh, yeah, my husband in 1988 had his Bigfoot encounter at his favorite fishing spot we went to in the 70s until he died in 2012. He, likes to trout or salmon fish. I think it was trout fishing. And he had his Bigfoot encounter. And I was like, would you kind of tell me the story? So she starts telling me the story. Even the people that are working at Cabela's stop what they're doing to listen to this story, even some of the customers. And you have this fragile little old lady sitting there telling this story. And this is the story that she told. And then when she got towards the end of it, one of her grandkids comes up and says, hey, Grandma, you telling about, Papa's Bigfoot story? She's like, yeah. And the kid looked at me, and there was a grandkid. He's probably 12, 14 years old. I was like, oh, this is true. So this is the story. Back in 1988, in the spring, they always go up. I forgot the place in Canada. Don't know where it's at, but it was a stream. This guy liked to go trout fishing. And I think he was fly fishing for trout. And, every morning they'd wake up at the campsite where they could park their cars. Other people would camp there too. He'd go walk down the trail into the woods. It's probably 1.5 miles, 2 miles, and he'd come up to the clearing, and there was the stream. And the way she described the clearing or the meadow, tall, high grass all over the place, mountains off on the other side of the stream, probably 500-600 yards. It started going up. We're talking like beautiful mountain scenery that you would picture in western part of Canada. So, he'd go fish there. He'd come back with his limited trout. One particular day, it was after it rained, and it was a sunny day, and the stream wasn't high up. You could literally walk across the stream to the other side, which was probably 20 yards in width, probably knee deep at its highest. So he's fishing on this one bank and he's catching, trout after trout. The old lady did tell us that her husband realized there was no birds, no nothing. It was just all you could hear was the wind. He heard no animals, saw no animals, nothing. And it's like every Bigfoot story. When they're around, shit gets quiet. So, he's fishing and he's got his basket there. I don't know why fly fishermen like to put fish in the baskets, but he's got his basket there. Think of a picnic basket, but he's putting his fish in there. And also he's got his lunch in there. And this is around noon. And he's catching his limit, and he felt, she said as if he was being watched. This is springtime. Bears are coming out of hibernation. And sure enough, he caught his limit. I don't know what the limit is in Canada, but he caught his daily limit of trout. And he's packing up and he's getting ready to leave. He's taking his fly fishing pole. He didn't eat his lunch. He's just going to go back to the campsite and have lunch with the wife, which is the old lady who was telling me the story, the grandma. From where the stream is at, the trail to the woods that he walked out of is probably 100 yards. So he's walking and he's got his bear repellent out. Those bears are coming out of hibernation. So he's walking, but he's got this weird eerie feeling that he's being watched. And he keeps canvassing the area. Now he's walking back. The stream is behind him. All right. And they're kind of high embankments. They're probably like 3-4 foot high embankments. But it's manageable for a human. You can literally walk down the embankment, walk into the creek, the stream, walk back up the other embankment, and you won't, the water won't sweep you away. It's knee deep, maybe waist deep in some places, all right? But it's very manageable for a human. So he's walking back towards the campsite on the trail where the cars park and they have their camper at. He's getting probably halfway to the woods. He's still out in the meadow open. And it's a big meadow open in between a valley of mountains. Lo and behold, in front of him, walks out of the woods this grizzly bear. It doesn't notice the guy yet. The grizzly bear raises up his head and starts sniffing and turns to the right, which is where the guy's at. And he's like, oh God, he smells the fish. The grizzly bear turns towards him and starts walking down the trail. And he's just like looking at this bear, and he had his bear repellent out. But in the process of walking, he put his bear repellent back into the basket. So he's walking, and he stops, he sees the bear coming at him, and he's frozen in fear, and he's trying to find this bear repellent that he originally had in his hand moments ago. This bear's walking towards him. This bear's speeding up towards him, and the bear gets within like 20 feet of him, stops, raises up, growls, and as fast as he got up on his two hind legs and raises his paws like in a defensive, I want what you got kind of growl, the bear drops down, does a 180, and hauls ass back where it came. And this guy, the way the lady's telling me, her husband's just standing there looking like, what made this bear run? And he's thinking, oh Jesus God, there's a bigger bear behind me. And he turns around to look to see, expecting to see a bigger bear behind him, a grizzly bear. No, he cannot believe what he's seeing. On his side of the embankment, he sees this big, hairy man, or this creature, that has got its left leg on top of the embankment, its right leg is obviously down in the embankment, still in the stream, like looking at him, like it was there to save him from this grizzly bear. And he's making eye contact, and when she's telling the story, because she says she's heard this story thousands of times from her husband telling other people, that he's looking eye to eye at this thing, but he's looking up at it, and this thing's probably 40 yards from him, halfway up on the embankment, halfway into the stream, just looking at him. And they're like making eye contact, looking back and forth. And the way she tells the story, she laughs when she tells this, and his name was Richard. His real name was Richard. And she goes, I'll never forget my old Richard telling me it's like looking at this thing. And it's like, I just left the basket down for this big old guy that just saved my life. And to hear her in that voice say that is pretty hilarious. But she says that he sat there and looked at this thing. He's like talking this thing. He's like, hey, big guy, I mean you no harm. Thanks for saving me. I'll leave my basket for you. Take whatever you want. I'll just come back and pick it up later. And he turns and walks off. Leaves the basket there. When he gets to where the bear came out, because the bear was long gone, he turns and looks back, and it's Bigfoot. And this guy's, at this time, I think in the 80s, he's probably maybe in his late 40s, in his 50s. He turns and looks around. He's now 50 yards of where he dropped the basket at. He turns around. The Bigfoot's got the basket. It's already on the other side of the embankment, walking through the meadows, and he looks back. And the guy, the way the wife says, the guy looks at him, waves at him, gives him a thumbs up. He turns back, walks the 1.5 miles, 2 miles, somewhere around there, to the campsite, sits down. His wife's looking at him, she's like, Richard, you all right, honey? He's like, ma'am, honey, my love, I need a drink. And now he's freaked out, and the wife's like, Richard, you all right? Richard, you all right? And you can tell he's in shock. And other people are noticing it, and they're coming up like, hey, mister, you all right? And he's like, man, I just saw a huge Bigfoot that saved me from a grizzly bear. And there happened to be a park ranger there. I don't know what they're called in Canada, but there was somebody of authority at the park just, checking to see if people aren't doing things illegal. And he told them. They couldn't believe it. Go ahead.
Was it a Mountie?
I don't know. I don't know if it's a Royal Canadian Mountie. I don't know. It was their equivalent to their fish and wildlife. And he's like, oh yeah, we get reports of that all the time, that, grizzlies here, and we have Bigfoot encounters, and we get these reports all the time. So they walk back to this area, and he's, when she was telling me, it was like, 8 or 9 people walking back, because, hey, they don't believe them. And the fish and wildlife guy, whatever Canada calls them, was walking back. And lo and behold, you see his tracks, the old man's tracks, her former husband's tracks. You see where the evidence, and this is her telling the story of where the evidence of the basket was left. And sure enough, you see unmistakable, huge-ass footprints. Barefoot footprints that were huge. And sure enough, people are like, oh dear God. And they're looking, and you can see it comes up, grabs the basket. You can see, this is her telling the story. You can see it turning around, pivoting, walking back. And they walk back to the embankment, and you can see where the guy was fishing and all this and that. You can see where the basket was laying previously. You can see that this thing was so huge, the way she described it, so huge and heavy that it left deep impressions on the embankment of a right foot into the stream, in the embankment, into the water, and its left foot was embedded on top of the embankment berm. That's like 4 feet. And the strides, they said, were, the way she was telling me, was like they're 8-foot strides. And they said the scariest thing was when they looked across the embankment. They didn't walk across the embankment. They looked across the embankment, and you can see the footprints of it going up the other embankment, and the tall grass, because she said that, we'll call him the conservation officer, said, yeah, that grass is 5 feet high, and you can see a wide path of like something walking through there. And he was like, oh dear God. He goes, I've heard of stories. I don't believe people. This is the first time of my 12 years of working here that evidence has been left behind. Visible, humongous footprints. And they got back to the campsite. They did paperwork, whatever report they had to fill out. She said some people, after seeing that, you see the barefoot foot tracks also. You see the Bigfoot footprints, and you see his tracks. When they got back, within 30 minutes, half the people packed up and cleared out. The other half decided they're going to leave the next morning. She said the next morning it was just, him and her left. And she's like, Richard, what do we do? He's like, yeah, let's leave and we'll take a year or two off and we'll come back. And she said they came back in 1990. And a couple of days before they got there, there was another incident of a Bigfoot saving a fisherman. And he went back and he never had another encounter, but he always felt like he was being watched. And he would leave, like, whatever the limit, well, let's say the limit was 8. He would take 2 fish and leave 6 behind. And he went back every time, and things was left for him. If it was colorful rocks, if it was fruits, berries, whatever took the fish left stuff. And he told his wife, or his wife told us, that it was a mutual agreement. Thank you for allowing me to fish here. Thank you for saving me. I'll leave you 80% of what I catch. And he would even leave peanut butter and strawberry jelly sandwiches. And every time he'd go there, he'd always made sure his wife made 10 of them. So every time he'd go fish there, he would leave whatever he caught, like 6 fish or 8 fish and the sandwiches. And he'd come back the next morning. They would be gone, and gifts would be left.
So you're trying to tell me that Bigfoot's like peanut butter and jelly sandwiches?
I'm just telling you what the old lady, the grandma, told us. And the grandson confirmed it. Because apparently the grandson's father is their son. And he's like, oh yeah, Dad would just tell us these same stories that Grandpa encountered Bigfoot, and Grandma would confirm it. We've been to the spot. We're going to the spot and dump the ashes. And that's when I realized that the gentleman died, and that they were going to dump his ashes there this summer. It was a all-family trip, and they had 4 children. And she's had, I think 13 grandchildren. So they were all going to meet there and dump his ashes at that spot. And I heard that back in 2012 when I was at Cabela's. I was like, wow. Or not in 2012. He died in 2012. But I heard this. We were going out west to hunt. And I think that was, 2015, 2016. I don't know. But he died in 2012. This was told 5-6 years ago. And, yeah. And I was like, I believe you. And some of the people saying they were believing her, but you can tell by their body, facial expressions and their body demeanor that they didn't. And I was like, I'm sorry to, the eavesdrop, but I've had my Bigfoot encounter in 1991 in West Virginia. And we compared the sizes and stuff, and the Bigfoot that I saw was a foot smaller than this one. And the one I saw was like 9.5 foot for West Virginia. So this thing had to be every bit of 10.5 feet that she saw, or that he saw.
Now, we're not going into your story just yet, so let's hold off there on much details on that.
No problem, but this little bitty tiny old lady was telling me this story. And you can just tell when somebody's full of shit. This lady was honest, sincere, tearing up in certain parts because it reminded her of her Richard, she called him. And, yeah. So yeah, that story was true. I took it as true. I mean, why would an old lady lie about something like that?
Yeah, especially if she's going back there to dump the husband's ashes in an area, I guess it's close to her heart or something like that, does kind of add credibility to the account.
The thing I liked about the whole story is the gift giving. It's like the story we told where, Jeremiah found that possum. It took the deer, left the possum. Well, this thing saved the guy. He left the fish for the Bigfoot. The Bigfoot took it, and then it was like a mutual friendship. I'll allow you to hunt here. Just, pay your dues, and I'll give you a gift. And the thing about it was, there's these special stones, and I explained it to Chief, our Apache friend, and she had a bracelet made from these stones, and he said those are spiritual stones sacred to the First Nations Indians up there. And I said, yeah, one stone was blue, the other one was like a black. They looked as if they were polished. And he's like, that's big. If a Bigfoot gives you something like that, it has meaning. It's like you're protected. But she showed me the bracelet of the stones that the Bigfoot would leave. Of course, they were broken down, made smaller into a bracelet. But yeah, I believed it. It sticks to me to this day, that story.
Well, that's another story. As we've said before, some of these stories may or may not be true. And mainly because we can't confirm or deny whether these events really happened. But once again, we have somebody that we feel like is giving a credible account of her husband's Bigfoot encounter. So this will conclude this episode of Dravo Vein. And once again, if you like this video and looking forward to seeing more, well, please hit that like button and subscribe. And Sebastian wants us to be sure and share the video.
Remember, here at Dravo Vein, fact or fiction, truth or lies, you decide. Until next time, enjoy Dravo Vein.